Be me, Howard. 34 years old, software dev at a mid-sized tech company. I'm not a rock star coder, not a genius, just a guy who's good at his job. Been with this company for a little over 5 years. I show up on time, I do my work, I hit my deadlines, and I help out the junior guys when they're stuck. You know the type. The guy you can rely on to get stuff done without any drama. The company had been pretty decent. Pay was good, work was interesting enough, and the people were mostly fine. My direct manager, Mr. Davison, was a classic old-school manager. A bit checked out maybe, but fair. He valued results. If your code worked and you didn't cause problems, you were golden in his book. For the past year, I had been the lead on our department's biggest project. It was a nightmare of legacy code and shifting client demands, but my team and I pulled it off. We launched it on schedule and under budget. It was a huge win. Mr. Davison had been dropping hints for months about a promotion. The senior manager position in our department had been empty for a while. He'd say things like, "Big things are coming for you, Howard," or "We need leadership like yours on a higher level." My best friend at work, Alan, a fellow dev, was already calling me boss man. He'd joke about me getting a corner office and forgetting all the little people. It was all lined up. I'd put in the years, I'd proven my worth with the big project. I was the logical choice. There was this other developer on our team, Emily. She'd been there maybe 2 years. She wasn't bad, but she was solidly average. I can't count the number of times I had to help her untangle her code or explain a basic concept. I never minded. That's what a senior team member is supposed to do. You help your colleagues. She was always very thankful, always saying how she couldn't have done it without me. Life was pretty simple. Work, go home, play some video games, hang out with Alan and some other friends on the weekend. I wasn't looking to change the world. I just wanted to be recognized for my work and move up a little bit. I felt like I had earned it. That's how the world is supposed to work, right? You work hard, you get rewarded. I was about to learn that's not how it works at all. The change started subtly. Our old head of HR retired. She was a sweet old lady who mostly just handled payroll and birthday cakes. Her replacement was different. Her name was Layla. She was probably in her late 30s, always dressed in these sharp, expensive-looking pantsuits. She walked with an air of absolute purpose, like she was on a mission to save the world, starting with our little office. The first email we got from her was an all-hands meeting invitation titled "A New Vision for Our Corporate Culture." Alan forwarded it to me with the message, "Get ready for some buzzword bingo." We all gathered in the main conference room. Layla stood at the front, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She started talking. For the first 5 minutes, it was standard corporate fluff. Synergy, dynamic paradigms, leveraging assets. Then the tone shifted. She started talking about the systemic imbalances in the tech industry. She mentioned the patriarchal structures that have historically held back progress. My ears perked up. This was new. She said our company, while good, had a long way to go to achieve true equity. She put up a slide with the company's gender demographics. It was about 60-40, male to female, pretty standard for a tech company. To her, this was a sign of a deep underlying problem, a problem of male toxicity and unconscious bias. A few of us guys exchanged looks. Alan was practically vibrating with the effort of not laughing. Mr. Davison just sat there, nodding along with a blank expression. He was a master of avoiding conflict. The meeting ended with Layla announcing a series of mandatory workshops for all employees. The first one was called Confronting Unconscious Bias. We all filed out of the room. Alan came up to me and clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, Howard," he said, "looks like we're the problem." I just shook my head. I figured it was just talk. A new HR head trying to make her mark. It wouldn't affect the actual work. It wouldn't affect my promotion. How could it? I was so naive. A few weeks later, the workshop started. We were all herded into a conference room with a facilitator Layla had hired. The facilitator was one of those people who speaks in a soft, condescending voice, like you're a child who needs to be gently corrected. We had to do role-playing exercises. We had to listen to scenarios about how a man interrupting a woman in a meeting is an act of microaggression. We were told that phrases like "hey guys" were exclusionary. It was a struggle to take any of it seriously. Most of us just wanted to get back to our desks. During one session, the facilitator asked us to go around and share an example of a time we witnessed patriarchal behavior in the workplace. The room was dead silent. Nobody wanted to play this game. Then Emily raised her hand. She told a story about how, in a meeting, a male colleague had talked over her to explain a technical point. She said it made her feel unseen and devalued. I remembered that meeting. The male colleague was me. She had been explaining a concept to a client completely incorrectly. I hadn't talked over her. I had gently corrected her before she embarrassed our entire team. I did it politely. I even said, "Emily makes a good point, but to add to that..." And now she was framing it as an example of me being a toxic male. I just sat there, stunned. I looked at her, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. After the workshop, I saw her talking with Layla. They were laughing. That was the first time I felt a real sense of dread. Shortly after that, Layla announced the formation of a Women's Leadership Mentorship Circle. It was an exclusive group by invitation only for promising female talent. They had special meetings with Layla and other senior female staff. They got sent to exclusive networking events. Emily was one of the first people invited. She started spending a lot of time in Layla's office. The atmosphere in the department started to change. It felt divided. There was a new clique forming, and if you weren't a part of it, you were on the outside. Alan and I would just keep our heads down and focus on our work. The promotion was still on my mind. Mr. Davison was still being encouraging, but he seemed a little more nervous around Layla. One afternoon, I overheard two women from another department talking in the break room. They were complaining that a male candidate they wanted to hire, a guy with a decade of experience, had been vetoed by HR at the last minute. Layla had told their manager that they needed to diversify the candidate pool and suggested they interview a woman who had just graduated from college. This was no longer just talk and stupid workshops. This was affecting the company's ability to function. Still, I told myself my situation was different. This was an internal promotion. It was based on performance. My performance was undeniable. Finally, the official email went out. The senior manager position was open for applications. I spent a whole weekend polishing my resume, writing a detailed cover letter, and documenting all my achievements, especially the big project. I submitted it on Monday morning. Mr. Davison sent me a winking emoji in chat. Alan bought me a coffee and said he was already preparing his "Congratulations, you magnificent bastard" speech. I had a formal interview with Mr. Davison. It was a breeze. He basically said it was just a formality. He told me he'd already put my name forward as his number one and only recommendation. He said the final decision just needed to be signed off on by HR. "It's in Layla's hands now," he said. "But don't worry, she knows your record. It's a slam dunk." A week went by, then another. I was getting antsy. I saw Emily going into Layla's office a lot. I figured she was probably just getting more mentorship. I asked Mr. Davison if there was any news. He got shifty. He said HR has their own process, that these things take time. He wouldn't look me in the eye. That's when I knew something was wrong. The announcement came on a Friday afternoon. An email from Layla to the entire department. Subject: exciting leadership news. My heart was pounding as I opened it. My eyes scanned the text. Pleased to announce that after a thorough and equitable selection process, the new voice to lead the team into a more inclusive future. Please join me in congratulating Emily on her promotion to senior manager. I had to read it 3 times. I couldn't process it. The office was silent. Everyone was reading the same email. I could feel every eye in the room on me. I looked over at Emily's desk. She was surrounded by the other women from the mentorship circle, all hugging her. She glanced over at me for a split second. There wasn't any triumph in her eyes. It looked like guilt. Alan came over to my desk. He didn't say anything. He just put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed. I felt numb. It wasn't just disappointment. It was a profound sense of injustice. 5 years of hard work, a career-defining project, all for nothing. I was passed over for someone I had personally trained, someone who was objectively, demonstrably less qualified. I packed up my things in a daze and left for the day. I couldn't stand being in that room. That weekend was one of the worst of my life. I just sat in my apartment, replaying everything in my head. What did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? But it wasn't about being good enough. I knew I was. This was something else. On Monday, I came into the office with a single goal. I needed an explanation. My first stop was Mr. Davison's office. I knocked and walked in. He looked up and visibly flinched. I asked him straight up what had happened. He started stammering. He wouldn't give me a straight answer. He talked about a new strategic direction and Emily's potential for growth. He kept using corporate buzzwords, like he was reading from a script Layla had written for him. I pressed him. I said, "You told me I was your #1 pick. You said it was a slam dunk. What changed?" He just sighed and looked down at his desk. "It wasn't my call, Howard. It came from HR. My hands were tied." He was a coward. He wouldn't fight for his own best employee because he was scared of the new HR lady. I felt nothing but contempt for him. I knew I wouldn't get a real answer there. So I went to the source. I walked to Layla's office at the other end of the building. Her door was open. She was typing on her laptop and looked up as I stood in the doorway. "Howard," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Come in. I'm glad you came. I know this must be difficult." I walked in and sat down opposite her desk. I decided to be direct. "I want to know why I wasn't chosen for the position," I said. She leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. She looked at me like a scientist studying a bug. "Your performance review was excellent," she began. "You're a very capable developer." "Then why did Emily get the job?" I asked, cutting her off. "Her record isn't even close to mine." That's when her smile dropped. Her eyes went cold. "It's not just about records, Howard," she said, her voice turning sharp. "It's about the bigger picture. This department has been a boys' club for far too long. It's an environment that stifles female talent. My job is to correct that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was admitting it. "So you're saying I didn't get the job because I'm a man?" She let out a short, sharp laugh. It was the most condescending sound I had ever heard. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You're not being punished. You're just not being prioritized. We needed to make a choice that signaled a commitment to progress. We needed to empower a woman into a leadership role." I was speechless, the sheer audacity of it. "That's discrimination," I finally managed to say. She scoffed. "It's not discrimination when you're correcting a systemic imbalance. Men like you have had every advantage for centuries. It's time for you to step aside and let others have a chance. Think of it as your contribution to equality." I just stared at her. This wasn't an HR manager. This was a zealot. There was no reasoning with her. She genuinely believed she was on a righteous crusade. She believed that discriminating against me was a moral good. "You'll be fine, Howard," she said, her fake sympathetic voice returning. "You'll land on your feet, but Emily needed this. The company needed this." I stood up. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out of her office. My mind was racing. I was angry, yes, but underneath the anger was a strange sort of clarity. She had just handed me everything I needed. She had admitted to my face that I was denied a promotion because of my gender. As I walked back to my desk, I felt something shift inside me. The numbness was gone. The self-doubt was gone. All that was left was cold, hard resolve. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Alan was waiting for me. He could tell from my face that it had gone badly. "Don't even tell me," he said. "Let's go get a beer after work, or 10. That night, we sat in a quiet corner of a bar. I told him everything, word for word, what Layla had said to me. Alan's jaw was on the floor. He wasn't the type to get angry, but I could see the fury in his eyes. That's illegal," he whispered. "She can't do that. She can't just say that." "She did," I said. "And she's so arrogant, she thinks she's untouchable." "So what are you going to do?" he asked. "Quit. You could get another job in a heartbeat." I took a long drink of my beer. "If I quit, she wins," I said, thinking out loud. "She gets exactly what she wants. One less man in the company. She'll just do this to someone else." "So you're going to stay and work for Emily?" "I couldn't do that, man. My pride wouldn't let me." "It's not about pride," I said. "It's about principle. She wronged me. The company let her wrong me. They're not going to get away with it." Alan looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. "You're going to fight them, aren't you?" I nodded. "I'm going to fight them, and I'm going to win." The next day I started my research. I spent my entire lunch break in my car, looking up employment lawyers on my phone. I found a firm that specialized in wrongful termination and discrimination cases. I made the call. I explained the situation to a paralegal who took down my information. She said a lawyer would call me back for a consultation. The call came 2 days later. The lawyer was a no-nonsense guy. He listened to my whole story without interrupting. When I was finished, there was a pause. "Mr. Howard," he said, his voice serious, "what this HR manager said to you, if you can prove it, is a textbook case of gender discrimination." "But it's my word against hers," I said. "How can I prove it?" "That's the challenge," he admitted. "We need more. We need documentation. We need evidence of a pattern. We need witnesses." He told me not to quit. He said the best thing I could do was stay at the company and be a model employee. And while I was there, I needed to gather every scrap of evidence I could find. So that's what I did. I became a quiet observer. I swallowed my pride and I went to work every day. Emily started her new role. It was awkward for everyone. She tried to lead team meetings, but she was clearly in over her head. She didn't have the technical depth to command respect. She would look to me for answers when she got stuck. I was polite. I was professional. I answered her questions. But I didn't volunteer anything extra. My days of mentoring her were over. I started an evidence folder on my personal cloud drive. I saved every email Layla sent out about her women-only initiatives. I made a note of every man who left the company and was replaced by a woman. Alan was my ally. He had my back. He forwarded me email chains from other departments that showed Layla's interference in their hiring processes. He agreed to write a sworn statement about my qualifications, the work I did on the big project, and how I had consistently helped Emily with her tasks. But I knew I needed something more. I needed a smoking gun. I needed Layla to hang herself with her own words, and I needed to be able to prove it. My chance came a few weeks later. It was a Friday. The company had one of those social mixers in the big break room, cheap beer and stale pretzels. Most people just showed up for 10 minutes and left. Layla was there, holding court with her circle of mentees. I saw her grab a beer. She seemed relaxed, confident, triumphant. I had an idea. It was a long shot, but I had to try. I took out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and hit record. I slipped it into my shirt pocket with the microphone pointing out. Then I walked over to her. She looked surprised to see me. I put on my best "I've accepted my fate" face. "Layla," I said, "no hard feelings about the promotion, by the way. I get it. You had to make a tough choice." She beamed at me. This was exactly what her ego wanted to hear. She wanted me to admit that her decision was right. "Thank you, Howard," she said. "That's very mature of you. I'm glad you understand." "I do," I said, lying through my teeth. "I guess Emily was just the better candidate for your vision." She laughed, that same awful, condescending laugh. "Oh, Howard, it wasn't about her being better. Honestly, your resume was more impressive, but that's not the point." My heart was hammering in my chest. Keep talking, I thought. Just keep talking. "My job isn't to hire the most qualified person," she said, lowering her voice a little, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "My job is to dismantle the patriarchy in this company, one position at a time, even if it means passing over a qualified man for a woman with potential." She took a sip of her beer, looking incredibly pleased with herself. "Even if a man with the qualifications of a tech god had applied, I would have chosen Emily. We need female leaders. What we don't need is another entitled man thinking the world owes him everything." I had it. I had everything. I just nodded slowly. "Well, when you put it that way, it makes sense. Anyway, have a good weekend." I walked away, my hands shaking. I went straight to the men's room, locked myself in a stall, and stopped the recording. I listened back. The audio was clear, every single self-incriminating word. I saved the file, backed it up in 3 different places, and emailed it to my lawyer with a single sentence. "I think I have what you need." My lawyer called me back the next morning. His voice on the phone was completely different. Before, he had been cautious, professional. Now, he sounded excited. He said he'd listened to the recording 5 times. He called it a silver bullet, a once-in-a-career piece of evidence. He explained that her words were a direct, unambiguous admission of discriminatory intent. Her motive wasn't to hire the best person, it was to actively not hire a man. He told me we were moving forward, and we were moving forward aggressively. The first step was to officially file the lawsuit. He warned me that as soon as we did, my life at the company would change. They would know it was me. He asked me if I was ready. I said I was. I went back to work and just waited. I kept my head down. I did my work. I was a ghost at my own desk. The tension in the department was thick enough to cut with a knife. Emily was failing in her new role. It was obvious to everyone. Projects were falling behind schedule. Clients were complaining about her lack of technical knowledge in meetings. She started delegating most of her actual management tasks to other senior members, basically trying to get them to do her job for her. She tried to give me a complex task once, and I just told her, politely, that I needed the requirements properly documented before I could start. A task that would have taken her a few hours. She never got back to me. She was drowning, and everyone knew it. About 2 weeks after I sent the recording to my lawyer, the bomb dropped. I was sitting at my desk when I saw two people in suits walk through the office doors. They walked straight to Mr. Davison's office. A few minutes later, Layla was called in. The whole department was silent, pretending to work, but everyone was watching. Through the glass walls of the office, we could see animated, panicked conversation. Layla looked furious. Mr. Davison just looked terrified. The men in suits left. A few minutes later, my email pinged. It was a meeting invitation from Mr. Davison. Subject, urgent discussion. Location, his office, in 5 minutes. Layla was also on the invite. Alan looked over at me from his desk and just gave me a slow, single nod. I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked to the office. When I walked in, the atmosphere was arctic. Layla was standing with her arms crossed, glaring at me with pure hatred. Mr. Davison was sitting at his desk, wringing his hands. He was the first to speak. His voice was shaky. He said the company had been notified of a legal complaint I had filed. He asked me if this was some kind of mistake. I just said, no, it's not a mistake. Layla exploded. She started ranting about my male fragility and how I was trying to punish a successful woman out of spite. She said I was a bitter, mediocre employee trying to get a payout I didn't deserve. She said this lawsuit was proof of the very toxic masculinity she was fighting against. I just sat there and let her go on. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. My lawyer had prepared me for this. He told me not to engage. Don't argue, don't explain, just listen. When she finally ran out of steam, Mr. Davison took over again. He shifted to a different tactic. He tried to sound like my friend. He talked about my long history with the company, all the good work I'd done. He said we should be able to sort this out, like reasonable people, without getting lawyers involved. Then came the offer. He said the company, as a gesture of goodwill, and without admitting any wrongdoing, was prepared to offer me a severance package. It was 3 months' salary. In exchange, I would drop the lawsuit and sign a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from ever talking about what happened. 3 months' pay to sign away my rights and let them bury their discrimination. I almost laughed. I stood up. "Thank you for the offer," I said, my voice completely calm. "But I'm not interested. My lawyer will be handling all future communication." I turned and walked out of the office, leaving them both sitting there in stunned silence. The next few months were a slow grind. The legal process is not like it is in the movies. It's a lot of waiting. The company hired a huge, expensive law firm to represent them. My lawyer told me this was a good sign. It meant they were scared. The first phase was discovery, where both sides have to hand over all relevant documents and communications. My lawyer filed a request for every email Layla had ever sent that contained words like gender, diversity, male, female, hiring, and promotion. He also requested the performance reviews and project histories for both me and Emily. The company's lawyers fought it, of course. They tried to claim it was confidential. The judge wasn't having it. He ordered them to produce everything. I can only imagine the panic that caused. Meanwhile, work became a social minefield. The news had spread. Nobody knew the details, but they knew I was suing the company over the promotion. People took sides. Most of the guys in the department were quietly on my side. They knew I'd been screwed over. They'd give me a nod in the hallway or a supportive message on chat. Layla's mentorship circle and her allies treated me like I was a monster. They would stop talking when I entered a room. They would glare at me in the break room. Emily avoided me completely. She couldn't even look at me. Through it all, I just kept doing my job to the letter. I was the perfect employee, punctual, productive, professional. I was giving them nothing they could use against me. The next big step was the depositions. This is where the lawyers get to question everyone under oath before a trial. Alan was deposed. He told me about it later. He said the company's lawyers tried to paint him as just my disgruntled friend, but he stuck to the facts. He talked about my project leadership. He talked about my qualifications. He described in detail the specific technical instances where he had seen me help Emily with her work. He was a rock. Then it was Mr. Davison's turn. My lawyer questioned him. He asked him, under oath, who was the more qualified candidate for the senior manager position. Davison squirmed. He tried to evade. He said they were both qualified in different ways. My lawyer pressed him, using his own performance reviews that I had provided. On this date, you gave Howard the highest possible rating on his project management skills. Is that correct? Yes. And on Emily's review from the same period, you noted that her project management skills needed development. Is that correct? A long, painful pause. Yes. My lawyer went on like that for an hour, picking apart every single metric, from coding efficiency to client feedback. By the end, he had forced Mr. Davison to admit, reluctantly, that based on every objective measure, I was the superior candidate. The final deposition was Layla's. I was in the room for that one, sitting next to my lawyer. She walked in with 2 lawyers from the fancy firm. She looked arrogant, defiant. She spent the first part of her deposition spouting her usual ideological nonsense. She said performance metrics were a patriarchal construct. She said she had chosen Emily based on her holistic potential and her ability to bring a new perspective. The company lawyers were nodding along, looking smug. My lawyer let her talk. He let her dig her own grave. He asked her if she thought I was a good employee. She reluctantly said yes. He asked her if my gender had played any role in her decision. Absolutely not, she said, looking the lawyer dead in the eye and lying through her teeth. That would be illegal and unethical. We chose the best person for our strategic goals. My lawyer paused. He looked down at his notes. Just one more thing, he said. I'd like you to listen to something. He placed a small digital recorder on the conference table. He pressed play. The sound of my own voice filled the room, then hers. Oh, Howard, it wasn't about her being better. Honestly, your resume was more impressive. I watched Layla's face. As her own words played, every drop of color drained from it. Her smug confidence evaporated, replaced by a look of pure animal panic. Her lawyer's jaws literally dropped. One of them put his head in his hands. My job is to dismantle the patriarchy in this company, one position at a time. When the recording got to the part about her not hiring a man even if he was a tech god, her lawyer frantically lunged forward and hit the stop button. The room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Layla was just staring at the recorder, her mouth slightly open. She looked like she had seen a ghost. My lawyer leaned forward. Ms. Layla, he said, his voice quiet but sharp as a razor. I'd like to remind you that you are under oath. The deposition was over. Her lawyer immediately asked for a recess and practically dragged her out of the room. The company's case had just been utterly annihilated, and they knew it. 2 days later, my lawyer got a call. It was a new settlement offer, a much, much bigger one. They were offering a huge sum, 6 figures, enough to not work for several years. But it wasn't just about the money. My lawyer went back with our demands. We wanted the full financial settlement. We wanted Layla to be terminated immediately. We wanted a formal written apology from the company's CEO. And we wanted the NDA to be one way. They couldn't talk about me, but I was free to tell my story to whomever I pleased. Their lawyers tried to argue. They said firing an executive was not something they could agree in a settlement. My lawyer's response was simple. Fine, we'll see you in court. And we'll be playing that recording for the jury and every news outlet we can find. They caved within an hour. They agreed to everything. The very next day, an email went out to the entire company from the CEO. It announced that Layla was no longer with the company, effective immediately. There was an audible gasp in our department. Everyone knew why. The schadenfreude was beautiful. Her whole clique of followers looked like they'd been slapped. Her career in HR was over. The story, even without my name attached, became a quiet legend in the local tech community. With a discrimination suit like that on her record, tied to a direct admission, she was blacklisted. A few months later, Alan sent me a photo. It was a picture of the barista at a downtown coffee shop. It was Layla. She was wearing a stained apron and looked miserable. As for Mr. Davison, his weakness had cost the company a fortune. He was quietly let go about a month after the settlement. The official reason was department restructuring. Emily's fate was almost as sad. With Layla gone, she had no one protecting her. Her incompetence was on full display. The project deadlines she was managing were a disaster. After a brutal performance review from Davison's replacement, she was given a choice: accept a demotion back to a junior developer role or resign. She resigned a week later. I never saw her again. Then came the final, most unbelievable part. A week after the settlement, money hit my bank account, my phone rang. It was the CEO of the company, the big boss. He apologized profusely. He said what happened was a disgrace and that he was personally embarrassed by the ideological activism that had taken root in his HR department. He said that my lawsuit had exposed a massive problem, and he was grateful. And then he offered me the job, the senior manager position, the one I should have had all along. He offered it with a 20% raise over what Emily had been making, plus a signing bonus that was clearly just another part of the settlement. I told him I needed to think about it. I talked it over with Alan. Part of me wanted to just take the money and run. But Alan said something that stuck with me. If you walk away, the story ends with Guy gets paid. If you go back, the story ends with Guy wins. He was right. It wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration, about setting things right. I accepted the offer. My first day as senior manager was surreal. As I walked through the office, people who had ignored me for months were now congratulating me. I held my first team meeting in the same conference room where it all began. I didn't mention the lawsuit. I didn't gloat. I just laid out my technical vision for the next quarter. I talked about getting our projects back on track. I talked about focusing on merit and results. The relief in the room, especially from the other male developers, was palpable. It felt like we could all finally breathe again. The work was hard. We had a lot of damage to undo, but the team was energized. We hit our targets. We fixed the broken projects. We earned back our clients' trust. About a year later, Alan poked his head into my office. It was a nice office. It even had a window. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me and leaned against the doorframe, a big grin on his face. "You know," he said, "I always told you you'd get the corner office." I took a sip of my coffee and looked out the window. "Yeah," I said, "just had to take the scenic route." We both started laughing. Justice is a rare thing in this world, but sometimes, if you're willing to fight for it, you actually get it.